The crystalline chandeliers of the Sterling Estate ballroom bathed the grand space in a warm, golden light. Each crystal facet refracted the glow, casting scattered prisms across the ivory walls adorned with delicate, hand-painted floral murals. Every inch of the room was a testament to perfection, from the marble floors polished to a mirror-like sheen to the towering arrangements of white roses and lilies that crowned each circular table. Waitstaff glided silently between guests, trays of champagne flutes balanced effortlessly in their hands. Laughter and the tinkling of glassware filled the air, blending seamlessly with a live string quartet tucked discreetly into one corner of the room. This was, by all accounts, a wedding that would be remembered. At the heart of it all stood Alex Sterling, his custom-tailored suit fitting like a second skin. His sandy hair was meticulously combed, and his piercing blue eyes carried the weight of the moment, or at least they were supposed to. He looked the part of a man who had it all: wealth, prestige, and now Victoria Hayes, the stunning socialite whose very name conjured images of old money glamour and impeccable taste. She was radiant, of course, in her bespoke gown of intricate lace and pearls. Her laughter was like music as she moved through the crowd, accepting compliments with practiced grace. Alex's lips curled into a faint smile as he sipped his champagne, nodding at guests as they approached to offer their congratulations. Yet, beneath the surface of his polished exterior, there was a hollowness he couldn't shake. It wasn't that he didn't care for Victoria. She was everything anyone could want: beautiful, clever, ambitious, perfect in the way people like them were expected to be. But as Alex scanned the room, he felt an inexplicable ache tug at his chest, a sense that something vital had been left behind his climb to this pinnacle. It was during this moment of quiet reflection that he saw her. She was standing near the edge of the room, partially obscured by one of the floral arrangements. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, tendrils framing a face he hadn't seen in years but would never forget: Sarah Bennett. His breath caught in his throat. She was wearing a simple black dress, the kind issued by catering companies, designed to blend into background. Her hands moved deftly, collecting empty glasses and crumpled napkins from a table where a group of tipsy guests had vacated their seats. Her movements were efficient, practiced, but there was a weariness to her posture, a heaviness that made Alex's chest tighten. Then he saw it, the subtle curve of her belly beneath the unflattering uniform. Pregnant. For a moment, the opulence around him seemed to blur and dim. The polished grandeur of the ballroom, the expensive perfume mingling with the scent of champagne and roses, the laughter and chatter of the elite, all of it faded as his mind raced to process what he was seeing. Sarah Bennett, his ex-wife, the woman he had once loved so fiercely it had terrified him, was here, and she was pregnant. Alex felt the blood drain from his face. Memories he thought he had buried came rushing back, sharp and vivid. Late nights spent talking about dreams and fears, the way her laughter had filled their tiny apartment when they had nothing but each other in a pile of unpaid bills, the fights, the apologies, the silence that had grown between them, vast and unbridgeable, until there was nothing left to say but goodbye. And now she was here in his world, but not as a guest, not as someone who belonged. She was cleaning tables, blending into the background like a shadow. She looked up then, as if sensing his gaze. Their eyes met, and Alex's heart slammed against his ribs. For a second, neither of them moved. Her expression was unreadable, a mask of professionalism that couldn't quite conceal the flicker of recognition in her dark eyes. Then she broke the gaze, turning away to resume her work, her movements quicker now, more purposeful. But Alex couldn't look away. A storm of emotion swirled within him: shock, guilt, confusion, and something else he couldn't quite name. His hand tightened around the stem of his champagne glass, the cold press of the crystal grounding him just enough to keep him standing. Questions crowded his mind, each more urgent than the last. Was she married? Who was the father? Why was she here, working at his wedding? And why, after all this time, did seeing her still feel like this? "Darling, are you all right?" Victoria's voice broke through the haze. She appeared at his side, her hand slipping into the crook of his arm, her delicate fingers giving him a gentle squeeze. She tilted her head, her perfectly painted lips curving into a concerned smile. "You look pale," she said. "Are you feeling okay?" Alex forced a smile, the kind he had perfected over years of boardroom meetings and charity galas. "I'm fine," he said, His voice steady despite the turmoil roiling beneath the surface. Just a bit overwhelmed, that's all. Victoria's smile widened, radiant and reassuring. Well, it's a big day, she said, leaning in to press a kiss to his cheek. Come find me if you need a moment. She drifted away, her gown trailing behind her like a whisper, leaving Alex standing there, frozen. His eyes sought out Sarah again, but she was gone, vanished into the sea of guests and staff. The room felt suffocating now, the weight of its perfection pressing down on him. For the first time that evening, Alex Sterling, the man who seemingly had it all, felt utterly lost. The sound of shattering glass drew a few startled gasps from the nearby tables, but Sarah Bennett barely flinched. She bent quickly, her hand steady as she gathered the broken shards from the marble floor. Her dark hair fell in loose strands around her face, the bun she'd tied hastily hours ago now unraveling under the strain of the evening. Her fingers worked deftly, ignoring the slight sting as a sharp edge grazed her skin. She was used to this, the long hours, the menial tasks, the way people barely saw her as they laughed and clinked their glasses. It hadn't always been this way. Years ago, Sarah had been the kind of woman who turned heads in a room, not because of her looks, though her beauty was undeniable, but because of the energy she exuded. She had been ambitious, vibrant, and full of ideas that lit up her conversations. She had wanted to make a difference, to build something meaningful. That drive had led her Alex Sterling. She had met him in college, back when life was less complicated. Alex had been magnetic, his confidence tempered by an unexpected vulnerability that had drawn Sarah in like a moth to a flame. They had been inseparable, studying late into the night, dreaming of a future that seemed boundless. Their tiny apartment had been their haven, filled with secondhand furniture and walls plastered with sticky notes mapping out their shared goals. They had loved fiercely, and for a while, it had been enough. But dreams had a way of diverging. Alex's ambitions had grown beyond anything Sarah could keep pace with. He wanted more money, more power, more recognition. Sarah, in contrast, had craved stability, a simple life filled with love and purpose. The fracture had been inevitable, though it hadn't made it any less painful. She still remembered the way Alex's voice had cracked when he'd said goodbye, his eyes filled with regret even as he walked away. And now, here she was, picking up the pieces, literally and figuratively, while Alex stood on the other side of the room, surrounded by wealth and privilege, his perfect life on full display. Sarah straightened, cradling the broken glass in her hands as she turned toward the kitchen. Her steps were measured, careful, but her mind raced with memories. She hadn't wanted to take this job, not at his wedding of all places, but the bills didn't care about her pride. The baby growing inside her didn't either. She'd almost made it to the back when she heard the voice. "Excuse me, aren't you supposed to be working?" The words were sharp, cutting through the murmur of the crowd like a whip. Sarah turned slowly, her stomach sinking as she met the gaze of a guest, a middle-aged woman in an emerald gown that clung too tightly to her figure. The woman's lips curled in disdain as she waved a manicured hand toward the table. "There's a spill here," the woman continued, her tone dripping with condescension. "Do you think you could do your job instead of lingering?" Heat rushed to Sarah's cheeks, but she forced herself to stay calm. She set the broken glass aside and grabbed a cloth from her apron, stepping toward the table. "I'm sorry for the delay," she said quietly, kneeling to clean the spilled champagne. The woman's scoff was audible. "Honestly, I don't know why they hire people like you. It's a wonder you even passed a background check." Sarah froze, the cloth trembling in her hand. Her throat tightened, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. The humiliation was suffocating, made worse by the fact that she couldn't defend herself without risking her job. She forced her gaze downward, her vision blurring as tears threatened to spill. "That's enough." The voice was low and firm, but it cut through the tension like a blade. Sarah looked up in shock to see Alex standing just a few feet away, his expression cold and unyielding as he addressed the woman in emerald. "I believe she's doing her job just fine," Alex continued, his tone measured but unmistakably sharp. "If you have an issue, take it up with the management. Otherwise, I suggest you keep your comments to yourself." The woman blinked, momentarily stunned into silence. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but seemed to think better of it. With a huff, she turned on her heel and stalked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Sarah's heart was pounding as Alex turned to her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. His gaze softened, the icy mask he'd worn slipping to reveal something far more vulnerable. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Sarah nodded, unable to find her words. Her hand tightened around the cloth as she rose to her feet, her legs unsteady beneath her. She could feel the weight of the room's attention pressing down on her, every pair of eyes fixed on the scene that had just unfolded. "Thank you," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. Alex's jaw tightened, and for a moment, it seemed as though he wanted to say something more. But then a figure appeared at his side. Victoria, her expression carefully composed, but her eyes sharp as they darted between Alex and Sarah. "Darling," Victoria said, her tone light but laced with an undercurrent of suspicion. "What's going on?" Alex hesitated, the tension in his shoulders betraying his discomfort. "Nothing," he said finally, slipping back into the polished demeanor that came so easily to him. "Just handling a small issue." Victoria's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, but she nodded, looping her arm through his. "Come on," she said, tugging him gently. "Our guests are waiting." As they walked away, Sarah exhaled shakily, her chest aching with a mix of gratitude and bitterness. The Alex she had known would have defended her too, but this Alex, the one married to a woman like Victoria, the one who belonged to a world that Sarah could never enter, felt like a stranger. And yet, as she watched him disappear into the crowd, she couldn't help but feel the flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: hope. The evening's festivities carried on, the sounds of clinking glasses and lively chatter filling the Sterling estate. Yet for Alex, the vibrant energy of the wedding felt like a distant hum. As he slipped out of the ballroom, his steps were brisk, purposeful, his mind racing as he scanned the hallway for Sarah. He found her in the back corridor near the service entrance, her apron folded neatly on a bench beside her. She was leaning against the wall, her head tilted back, eyes closed as though trying to steady herself. The faint flicker of a fluorescent light overhead cast uneven shadows on her face. For a moment, Alex hesitated. She looked tired, vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache with something he couldn't quite name. But then his thoughts snapped back to the curve of her belly, and a storm of questions surged within him. "Sarah," he said, his voice sharper than he intended. Her eyes flew open, and for a brief second, there was a flash of something. Fear, frustration, relief. It was gone before he could decipher it, replaced by a guarded expression as she straightened. "What do you want, Alex?" she asked, her tone flat but steady. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "We need to talk about the baby." Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line, and she crossed her arms over her chest. "There's nothing to talk about," she said, her voice tight. "It's none of your business." "Not my business?" Alex's frustration flared, his brows knitting together. "How can you say that, Sarah? If the baby is mine—" "Don't," she cut him off, her voice rising just enough to echo faintly down the empty corridor. "Don't do this, Alex. Not here. Not now." "Then when?" he asked, his tone softening but no less urgent. "You can't just drop back into my life like this, pregnant, and expect me to ignore it. I deserve to know the truth." Her laugh was bitter, her eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and pain. "The truth? You want the truth, Alex? Fine. The truth is, you abandoned me long before we officially broke up. You were so consumed with your career, your ambitions, that I stopped mattering. We stopped mattering. I was just there, a convenience you outgrew." The words hit him like a physical blow, and for a moment, Alex was stunned into silence. He had expected resistance, maybe even anger, but the rawness of her words cut deeper than he'd anticipated. "That's not fair," he said finally, his voice low. "You knew what I was working for, what we were building toward. I thought you understood." "Understood." Sarah's voice broke slightly, and she shook her head, her hands gripping her sides as though trying to hold herself together. "I understood that I was losing you. Every late night at the office, every missed dinner, every time you made me feel like I wasn't enough, I understood perfectly. And when I realized I couldn't compete with your dreams, I let you go. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Alex's chest tightened, guilt twisting like a knife. Sarah, he began, but she raised a hand to stop him. You don't get to play the victim here, she said, her voice firm. You moved on. You have your perfect life, your perfect wife. And she paused, exhaling shakily. I'm just trying to survive. That's why I didn't tell you about the baby. Because I couldn't handle the disappointment if you walked away again. Her words hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Alex opened his mouth to respond, but the sound of approaching footsteps made them both freeze. Alex. The voice was light and melodic, but tinged with an edge of suspicion. Victoria appeared at the end of the corridor, her figure framed by the soft glow of the ballroom behind her, her perfectly sculpted brows furrowed as she took in the scene before her. What's going on? She asked, her gaze shifting between Alex and Sarah. Sarah immediately looked away, her hands falling to her sides as she took a small step back. Alex's jaw tightened, and he turned to face Victoria, his expression carefully neutral. Just a private conversation, he said, his tone measured. I knew Sarah from college. We were catching up. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, her lips curving into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Oh, how lovely, she said, her voice sugary sweet, but her gaze lingered on Sarah's face, sharp and assessing. I don't believe we've been introduced. Sarah's hands curled into fists at her sides, and she forced herself to meet Victoria's gaze. I'm just one of the staff, she said evenly, her voice devoid of emotion. Victoria's smile widened slightly, and she tilted her head. Well, thank you for all your hard work tonight, she said, her tone polite but dismissive. Alex's stomach churned as he watched the interaction, the tension palpable. He could see the wheels turning in Victoria's mind, her natural intuition piecing together fragments of a story she didn't yet fully understand. Darling, she said, turning her attention back to Alex, her voice softened now. Are you coming back to the party? Our guests are wondering where you are. Alex hesitated, his gaze flickering to Sarah, who had already begun to gather her things, retreating into herself. He wanted to say something, to fix the brokenness that seemed to radiate from her, but Victoria's hand on his arm anchored him to the present. Of course, he said finally, his voice hollow. Let's go. As they walked away, Victoria cast one last glance over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. Alex felt the weight of her suspicion settling over him, a reminder that the past he thought he'd left behind was far from over. The Sterling estate had fallen into a heavy, post-celebration quiet. The distant echoes of the staff cleaning up were barely audible through the thick walls of the private suite, where Alex sat, his tie loosened, his fingers steepled against his forehead. The weight of the evening pressed down on him, an inescapable tension that throbbed at the base of his skull. Victoria had left the room moments ago, but her parting words hung in the air like smoke. You need to make a decision, Alex, she had said, her voice tight but controlled, betraying none of the fury simmering beneath. Whatever this is with her, it's over. You're my husband. You need to act like it. Her ultimatum was as clear as it was ruthless. Victoria had always been decisive, a woman who knew what she wanted and how to get it. It was one of the things that had initially drawn Alex to her unyielding confidence, a sharp contrast to the uncertainty that had plagued him for so long. But tonight, that same quality felt suffocating, her sharp gaze cutting through him like a scalpel as she demanded answers he wasn't ready to give. He had tried to explain, tried to tell her that his conversation with Sarah was nothing, that it had stirred up old feelings but meant little in the grand scheme of things. But Victoria had seen through him, her eyes narrowing as he fumbled for words. She left without waiting for a response, her heels clicking sharply against the marble as she disappeared down the corridor. Now, alone in the dimly lit suite, Alex wrestled with a knot of emotions twisting inside him. Guilt, frustration, confusion. Sarah's words from earlier played over and over in his mind, her voice trembling as she accused him of abandoning her, of leaving her to pick up the pieces of their shattered life together. And then there was the baby. His chest tightened at the thought. Could it really be his? If so, what did that mean for the life he had built with Victoria? A sharp knock at the door was a shot to his feet. The boy's uniform was slightly rumpled, his eyes wide with a mixture of nerves and exhaustion. "This was left for you, sir," the boy said, holding out the envelope. Alex hesitated before taking it, his heart quickening as he recognized the handwriting scrawled across the front. Sarah's. "Thank you," he said, his voice stiff. The boy nodded and hurried away, leaving Alex standing in the doorway with the envelope clutched in his hand. He closed the door and returned to his seat, staring at the envelope as though it were a living thing, something that might lash out if he got too close. Finally, with a deep breath, he slid a finger beneath the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The scent of faintly perfumed paper met his nose, a bittersweet reminder of nights spent in their cramped apartment. Sarah curled up beside him with a notebook in hand, scribbling her thoughts and dreams. The letter began simply, the ink slightly smudged in places, as though written in haste or through tears. "Alex, I don't even know where to begin. Seeing you tonight brought back so much, things I thought I had buried long ago. But you deserve to know the truth, even if it's too late, even if it doesn't change anything. When we broke up, I thought I could handle it. I thought I could start over, build a life without you. But it wasn't as easy as I told myself it would be. My family turned their backs on me, called me foolish for loving someone who didn't fit into our world. I lost my job a month later, and with no support system, no safety net, I fell apart. There were nights I didn't know where my next meal would come from. I pawned my grandmother's necklace to pay rent, begged for extra shifts at jobs that barely kept the lights on. I wanted to hate you, Alex. I wanted to blame you for all of it, but I couldn't. I still can't. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. Terrified of what it meant for me, for the baby. But more than that, I was terrified of telling you. Not because I didn't think you'd care, because I knew you would, but because I couldn't bear to see the disappointment in your eyes if I wasn't enough, if the baby wasn't enough to make you stay. So I made the choice for both of us. Asterisk. Asterisk, I don't regret keeping her a secret. It was the only way I could protect myself. But seeing you tonight, knowing you're here, I can't help but wonder if I was wrong. If maybe, just maybe, you deserve the chance to know her. Asterisk. Asterisk, her name is Lily. She's 3 months along, and she's perfect. She has your eyes. Alex. I see them every time I look at her. Asterisk. Asterisk, I don't expect anything from you. I don't even know if you want to be part of her life. But you deserve the truth, and this is it. Asterisk. Sarah. The letter trembled in Alex's hands as he finished reading. His mind reeled, trying to absorb the weight of her words, the enormity of what she had revealed. Lily, his daughter. The name felt foreign and familiar all at once, a strange mixture of joy and sorrow swelling in his chest. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the letter as though it held the answers to questions he hadn't yet formed. His thoughts were a whirlwind, torn between the life he had built with Victoria and the life he had left behind with Sarah, one filled with polished perfection, the other raw and unfinished but undeniably real. And somewhere in the depth of his heart, Alex knew he was standing on the precipice of a decision that would change everything. The soft hum of the morning city filtered through the tall windows of Alex's penthouse office. The skyline stretched before him, a testament to his accomplishments. Towering buildings bearing his name, bustling streets filled with the energy of a world he had helped shape. Yet, as he stared out at the view that had once filled him with pride, all he felt was an emptiness that refused to be ignored. He sat in his leather chair, the letter from Sarah still folded neatly in his pocket. It had been days since he'd received it, yet her words echoed constantly in his mind, pulling him back to moments he had tried to forget. Memories of Sarah, her laughter, her unwavering belief in him, the way she had been his anchor through the storms of his ambition. But he had let her go, or more truthfully, he had pushed her away, blind to the cost of chasing a future that now fell hollow. Alex closed his eyes, leaning back as he let the memories come. In the early days, their apartment had been a chaotic mess of textbooks, takeout containers, and hastily scribbled plans on cheap notebooks. Sarah had always been there, a constant presence who balanced his restless drive with her quiet strength. He remembered the nights when they stayed up until dawn, her head resting on his shoulder as they talked about their dreams. His for building an empire, hers for making a difference, even if it was on a smaller scale. She had worked 2 jobs to support them when he decided to take a risk on an unpaid internship at a prestigious firm. She had believed in him, even when he doubted himself, her encouragement a lifeline during those uncertain years. Yet, as his success grew, so did the distance between them. He had told himself it was temporary, that once he reached a certain point, he'd have time to focus on her, on them. But that point had never come, and by the time he realized it, Sarah was gone. A knock at the door pulled Alex from his thoughts. His assistant stepped in, holding a tablet and a stack of documents. "Mr. Sterling, your 10 is ready to begin," she said. Alex shook his head, rising from his chair. "Cancel it," he said simply. "Cancel everything for the rest of the week." The assistant blinked, startled. "Sir, I'm delegating. Have Thompson and Ramirez handle anything urgent. I need," he hesitated, glancing back at the skyline, "I need some time." The decision to step back from his empire was met with shock and confusion. But Alex didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of clarity. He spent his days quietly unraveling the tangled mess of his priorities, rediscovering what truly mattered. Without fanfare, he set up a trust fund for Sarah and Lily, ensuring they would never have to struggle again. He wanted to do more, but he wasn't ready to face Sarah directly. Not yet. Instead, he poured himself into the simple, human moments he had neglected for so long. He took long walks in the park, watched the sunrise without rushing to the office, and listened to music without the hum of emails in the background. Slowly, he began to feel a shift, a sense of purpose that wasn't tied to margins or board meetings. The turning point came at a high-profile charity gala Victoria had insisted they attend. The event was everything she loved, opulent, exclusive, and crawling with photographers. Alex had agreed to go, knowing it was a necessary performance to maintain appearances. But as the night wore on, he found himself withdrawing. The shallow conversations and superficial smiles grated against his newfound perspective. Victoria, however, was in her element, draped in a designer gown, flitting from group to group, her laughter ringing out like a bell. But her demeanor shifted when she caught Alex standing alone near the edge of the ballroom, his expression distant. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed, pulling him aside, her voice low but her tone sharp enough to draw the attention of those nearby. Alex frowned, caught off guard by her sudden anger. "What are you talking about?" "You've been sulking all night," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how this looks? People are watching, Alex. They're always watching. You can't afford to be distracted." "Distracted?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "Maybe I'm tired pretending. Did you ever think of that?" Victoria's eyes narrowed, her carefully constructed mask slipping. "Pretending?" she repeated, her voice rising. "I've stood by you, Alex, through everything. And now you're what? Throwing it all away? For what?" "For her." The room fell silent as her words rang out, the murmurs of nearby guests halting as they turned to watch the scene unfolding. Alex felt the weight of their stares, but didn't care. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of what they thought. "This isn't about her," he said, his voice steady. "It's about me, about what I've become." He took a step back, his gaze unwavering as he met Victoria's furious eyes. "I'm done pretending, Victoria. Done living a life that isn't mine." She stared at him, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to contain her fury. But before she could respond, Alex turned and walked away, leaving the ballroom and the life he had built behind him. The annulment was finalized quietly, the details buried beneath layers of legalese and non-disclosure agreements. Victoria's obsession with appearances ensured she wouldn't contest it publicly, though her parting words were sharp enough to leave scars. Alex didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt free, and as he stood outside the modest apartment building where Sarah lived, clutching a bouquet of lilies in one hand and a trembling hope in the other, he realized he was ready to begin again. The late autumn sun cast a soft, golden glow over the small suburban street, where Sarah's modest home sat. The house, though unassuming, exuded warmth and care. The flower boxes on windows were filled with vibrant mums, their bright colors a testament to Sarah's growing sense of stability. She had worked hard to carve out this life, a life that, while far from glamorous, was hers and hers alone. Inside, Sarah stood in the tiny kitchen, her hands moving deftly as she prepared dinner. The rhythmic chop of the knife against the cutting board was soothing, grounding her as she reflected on how far she had come. After Alex, there had been dark days, days when she wasn't sure she would find her footing again. But she had, slowly, rebuilt herself brick by brick, finding solace in the small victories. A job that paid the bills, friends who cared, and the steady, reassuring kick of her baby as she planned for their future. Sarah's career at a local nonprofit had started as a necessity, but soon became a passion. Helping others who had faced struggles similar to hers gave her purpose. And the connection she built through her work became the foundation of a support network she hadn't realized she needed. She had learned to trust herself again, her resilience shining through even on the hardest days. For the first time in years, she felt strong. Alex had seen this strength and it humbled him. Over the past few weeks, he had quietly observed the life Sarah had built, marveling at her resilience. She didn't need him to swoop in and fix things. She had already done that on her own. But that didn't mean he didn't want to be part of her life. For the first time, Alex approached their relationship, whatever it might become, not with the arrogance of someone trying to solve a problem, but with the humility of someone trying to support. He began to show up in small, meaningful ways, dropping off groceries under guise of an extra delivery from a local program, leaving a handwritten note with words of encouragement in her mailbox, or donating anonymously to the nonprofit where she worked. He wasn't sure if she knew it was him, but he didn't mind. This wasn't about recognition. It was about showing her that he cared without overstepping. One crisp afternoon, Alex finally worked up the courage to knock on her door. She answered cautiously, her expression guarded but curious. He held out a bouquet of lilies, his voice soft as he said, "I thought these might brighten your day." Sarah hesitated, but something in his eyes made her step aside and let him in. Their conversation was slow and careful, each word measured as though they were relearning how to speak to one another. But beneath the caution was a warmth that neither of them could ignore. They spoke about the changes in their lives, their hopes for the future, and the unspoken weight of their past. By the end of the visit, Sarah found herself smiling, a genuine, unguarded smile. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in years, she was open to finding out. The peace they were beginning to rebuild was tested far sooner than either expected. Late one night, Sarah's contractions started earlier than they should have. The sharp pain woke her from sleep, and panic set in as the contractions grew closer together. She realized something was wrong. She called a friend from her support group, who rushed over to take her to the hospital. The drive was a blur of streetlights and labored breaths, her friend's calm voice trying to soothe her. When they arrived at the emergency room, Sarah was wheeled away, fear gripping her as the fluorescent lights above flickered past. Alex received the call shortly after. He had been awake, staring out at the city from his penthouse, Sarah's name on the tip of his tongue as he rehearsed the conversation he planned to have with her the next day. When his phone buzzed and he saw the hospital's number, his heart stopped. The drive to the hospital was agonizing, every red light feeling like an eternity. By the time he reached the waiting room, his chest was tight with fear. Sarah's friend met him there, her face pale as she explained the situation. The baby was in distress. Sarah was losing blood. The doctors were doing everything they could, but there were no guarantees. Alex sank into one of the hard plastic chairs, his head in his hands. The sterile smell of the hospital filled his nose, the low hum of the fluorescent lights above grating against his nerves. Time seemed to stretch endlessly, each second a fresh wave of torment as he imagined the worst. And then, in that unbearable silence, came clarity. For so long, he had been consumed by guilt, by the need to make amends, to prove that he could be better. But sitting here, faced with the very real possibility of losing Sarah and the child he had never met, Alex realized it wasn't about redemption. It was about love. He loved Sarah. He always had. And now, more than ever, he wanted to be there for her, to fight for the family they might still have a chance to build. When the doctor finally emerged, Alex shot to his feet. The man's expression was tired but kind as he said, "The baby's in the NICU, but she's stable. Sarah, she's strong. She'll pull through, but she'll need time to recover." Relief washed over Alex, his legs nearly giving out as he sank back into chair. Tears pricked his eyes, but he didn't bother to wipe them away. "Can I see her?" he asked hoarsely. The doctor nodded. "Just for a moment. She needs rest." Alex followed the nurse down the quiet hallway, his heart pounding as he stepped into the room. Sarah lay pale and fragile against the stark whiteness of the hospital bed, her eyes fluttering open as he approached. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, no words needed. Then Alex reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm not going anywhere." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, but she gave the faintest nod, her fingers curling weakly around his. And in that moment, despite the fear and uncertainty that lay ahead, they both felt a flicker of hope, a fragile but undeniable promise of what could be. Over the next several weeks, Alex dedicated himself fully to supporting Sarah and their newborn daughter, Hope. He learned to navigate the NICU's sterile environment, spending hours at Hope's side, watching as her tiny chest rose and fell with each breath. The nurses taught him how to feed her, hold her, and soothe her when she fussed. He marveled at her resilience, her strength a mirror of Sarah's. Sarah, though physically weak, began to heal in small, steady steps. She and Alex grew closer, their late-night conversations in the hospital room filled with honesty and vulnerability. They spoke of their past mistakes, their fears, and their shared dreams for Hope's future. One evening, as they sat together watching Hope sleep in her incubator, Alex turned to Sarah. "I've been thinking," he said softly, "about what really matters, about what kind of life I want to build, for Hope, for us." Sarah looked at him, her expression weary but curious. "And what do you see?" "A life with meaning," he replied. "A life where I'm present, where I'm not chasing the next big thing, but focusing on what's right in front of me. You and Hope, you're my family, Sarah, and I want to build a future with you, one that's grounded in love and respect." Her eyes softened, and for the first time in years, she felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. "That's a big promise, Alex," she said quietly. "I know," he said, his voice steady, "but it's one I intend to keep." Months later, on a bright spring day, Alex, Sarah, and Hope found themselves at the park near Sarah's home. Hope, now thriving and healthy, giggled as she lay on a blanket in the grass, her tiny hands reaching for the sky. Alex and Sarah sat side by side on a bench, their shoulders brushing as they watched her. "She's beautiful," Alex said, his voice filled with awe. Sarah smiled, her gaze never leaving their daughter. "She's our miracle," she said softly. Alex reached over, taking Sarah's hand in his. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for giving me this chance." Sarah looked at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Just don't waste it," she replied, her voice firm but kind. As the sun set, casting a warm, golden glow over the park, the three of them sat together, surrounded by love and possibility. And in that quiet moment, they knew they had found not just redemption, but a new foundation for the life they would build together. The first rays of dawn filtered through the hospital room's curtains, casting a soft, golden light over the scene within. Sarah lay propped against the bed's pillows, her skin pale, but her expression serene as she cradled her newborn daughter in her arms. The baby was impossibly small, swaddled in a pastel pink blanket, her tiny hand curling instinctively around Sarah's finger. "Hope," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with a mix of exhaustion and wonder. The name felt right, a reflection of everything she had endured, everything she had fought for. This tiny, fragile being was her anchor, her reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was a path forward. Alex stood a few feet away, his hands shoved into his pockets as though to steady himself. His eyes were locked on the baby, his heart swelling with emotions too vast to name. He had always thought himself as composed, in control, but the sight of his daughter broke something open inside him. "Can I?" he asked hesitantly, gesturing toward the baby. Sarah glanced at him, her expression unreadable for a moment before she gave a small nod. Alex approached cautiously, his movements almost reverent as he reached out to take the baby into his arms. She was so light, so delicate, that he held his breath for fear of disturbing her. Hope's face scrunched slightly as she shifted, but then she settled, her tiny breath steady against his chest. Alex felt a lump rise in his throat, and for the first time in years, Tears slid freely down his face. "She's perfect," he said softly, his voice trembling. Sarah watched him closely, her own emotions a tangle of lingering doubts and a cautious yearning for the man she had once loved. Over the next few days, Alex remained by Sarah's side. He helped with the baby, fetched meals, and sat silently in the corner during moments when she needed rest. He didn't push or demand. He simply stayed, his quiet presence speaking volumes. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the room in shades of amber, Alex finally broke the silence. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability, "I know I can't undo the past. I can't erase the mistakes I made or the pain I caused you. But I want to try not to fix what was broken, but to build something new, something better." Sarah looked at him, her gaze searching. "Why now, Alex?" she asked. "Why not years ago, when I needed you most?" He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Because I was blind," he admitted. "I was so consumed with chasing success, with proving something to myself, that I lost sight of what really mattered. It took losing you to realize how much you meant to me, and it took meeting Hope to realize that I don't want to spend another day without you both in my life." Sarah's expression softened, but her guard didn't fully drop. "I don't need saving, Alex," she said firmly. "I've worked hard to get to where I am. If we're going to try this, it has to be as equals. I won't settle for anything less." Alex nodded, his respect for her deepening. "You have my word," he said. "No fixing, no overstepping. Just us, figuring this out together." After a long pause, Sarah gave a small, hesitant smile. "Then let's see where it goes." True to his word, Alex began making changes, not just in his personal life, but in the way he approached the world. He sold off a significant portion of his company, redirecting the proceeds to community initiatives that aligned with the values he had once ignored. Affordable housing projects, small business grants, and educational programs for underserved communities became his focus, a tangible way to give back and create lasting impact. It wasn't just about proving himself to Sarah. It was about becoming the man he wanted to be, the man Hope could be proud to call her father. Months passed, and their lives began to intertwine in quiet, meaningful ways. Alex accompanied Sarah to her nonprofit events, not as a benefactor, but as a participant, listening to stories and learning from the people she served. Sarah, in turn, began to see the depth of his commitment, his actions slowly eroding the walls she had built around her heart. On a crisp spring afternoon, the three of them found themselves at a small park near Sarah's home. Hope, now a few months old, was bundled in a soft yellow blanket, her wide eyes taking in the world with quiet curiosity. Sarah and Alex sat on a worn wooden bench, their shoulders brushing as they watched the sunlight filter through the trees. "She loves the outdoors," Sarah said, her voice warm as she adjusted the blanket around Hope. Alex smiled, his gaze fixed on his daughter. "She gets that from you," he said. Sarah glanced at him, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before she smiled. "Maybe she does," she said softly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of birdsong and children's laughter filling the air. Alex reached over, his hand finding Sarah's. She didn't pull away. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, "for giving me this chance." Sarah squeezed his hand gently. "Just don't waste it," she replied, her eyes meeting his. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the park, Alex leaned back and watched his daughter with a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. For the first time, his life felt whole, not because of the empire he had built or the accolades he had achieved, but because of the family sitting beside him. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by love and possibility, Alex knew they had found something stronger than redemption. They had found a new foundation. Adding tensions and intrigue, one evening, Alex and Sarah attended a community fundraiser together. The event was packed with local leaders, families, and people Sarah had helped over the years. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, but tension simmered just below the surface. As Alex mingled with the crowd, he overheard a conversation about his recent business decisions. He sold off half his assets. One man sneered. "What's next? Another charity case?" Alex ignored the comment, but Sarah didn't. She stepped forward, her voice steady. "Those charity cases are changing lives," she said, her gaze unwavering. And Alex is doing more good than you'll ever understand. The man's face reddened, but he said nothing further. Alex watched Sarah with a mixture of admiration and pride, realizing just how much strength she carried within her. Later that evening, as they stood on the venue's balcony, he turned to her. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. Sarah's laugh was soft but genuine. "Maybe not," she said, "but you're trying, and that's what matters." As time went on, Alex found himself navigating the delicate balance of rebuilding their relationship while respecting Sarah's independence. There were missteps, moments where his old habit of control and overreach surfaced, but Sarah's unwavering honesty kept him grounded. She challenged him to be better, not for her sake, but for his own. One night, as they sat together on her porch, Hope sleeping soundly in her crib inside, Sarah spoke candidly. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't fallen apart?" she asked. Alex considered the question, his brow furrowing. "I think about it all the time," he admitted. "But I don't think we would have grown into who we are now without it. As much as it hurt, maybe we needed to fall apart to find our way back together." Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe you're right. The story ends not with grand declarations or sweeping gestures, but with the quiet beauty of a life rebuilt." As the three of them sat together at the park, laughter and love surrounding them, it was clear that their journey was just beginning, and this time, they were ready to face it together. And just like that, Alex and Sarah's lives came full circle, not in the way either of them expected, but in a way that proved the resilience of love, the strength of forgiveness, and the beauty of second chances. Their story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, there's always hope for a brighter tomorrow, if we're brave enough to embrace it. If this story inspired you or made you reflect on your own journey, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and leave your thoughts in the comments. And of course, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell for more incredible stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.